all the various, whether it's meditation, whether it's spiritual inquiry, whether it's one of the innumerable types of spiritual practices, ultimately, if they are to reveal something that's useful or liberating or freeing, this is only going to happen if they bring us to the source of our own consciousness, to the root of one's existence. And the only thing that really seems to be in the way of that, what distracts us from that, what distracts mind from that, is mostly mental noise. Mostly mental noise. Just the inner chatter, which is mostly noise. Most of the inner chatter actually isn't very, if you really look at it, it doesn't make much sense. Most inner chatter is not particularly intelligent. If anything, it can often be rather petty. I think most people would be terrified if their mental chatter was to be, projected through some sort of speaker. Could you imagine if you walked around and something in your body just, emitted everything you thought even if you didn't want it to? Most people wouldn't step outside of their bedroom, much less their house. I mean, this just points up the ridiculousness of so much of the noise in the mind. And this noise, which you can't necessarily stop the noise, you can't really stop the noise. So don't bother asking, how do I stop the noise? We'll do each other a favor. You can't stop the noise. Not for long. And if you try to stop the noise tends to be noisier when you've stopped trying to stop the noise. So trying to stop one's own mental noise is sort of a losing game. It's a spiritual seeker's favorite game to play, trying to stop the internal noise. But the internal noise is actually very impersonal. It's completely impersonal. It's one of the most vital things to realize is that the noise in your mind is totally impersonal. It has nothing to do with you. You don't even create it. Your thoughts come quite spontaneously from a place that you have no idea where. They talk about things that you really can't make sense of half the time. And then they suddenly disappear when you least expect them to disappear. Moments of quietness suddenly hit you when you least expect them. And so the appearance of thought, internal noise, and the disappearance is something that you have no control over, because it's not a personal matter. You may think you're thinking, but that's the fundamental delusion. You are being thought, you are not thinking. And one can actually see this, although it's amazing how long we can go about life without seeing it. But you can see it if you ever have tried to meditate and your thinking goes on without you. It goes on quite against your will. It goes on without your consent. Your mind thinks about things you would rather have it not think about. It occasionally thinks about things that are quite shocking that it thinks about. And you can't really stop it from doing so. Because it's actually a completely spontaneous event that nobody has any control over. The best you can hope to do is delude yourself that you do have control over it. But a lot of that noise is generated through trying to stop it. A lot of the noise is generated, gets energized when you try to stop it. Just try not to think, and thinking goes nutty. So when they're seeing that the thinking process, the internal noise, is something that's impersonal, it does what it does without your consent. Has everybody realized that? Your mind does what it does without your consent. And if you haven't seen it yet, then take a look. If your mind is thinking everything you want it to think, then when you don't want it to think, just switch it off like a light switch. If you have so much control over your thinking, then just switch it off. Like going up to a switch, click off until you want it to turn on. And if you ever try to do that, what you'll see is you don't have as much control of the light switch as you thought you did. The thought switch gets turned on and off at the most inopportune times. I just did a retreat last week, and as people are sitting there meditating, sometimes people get very frustrated occasionally because their minds are a bit more noisy than they had in mind. And then, of course, then they ask me what to do, and we go through that little loop, There's not really much they can do, not much that I can do for them. But they keep trying to do, right? Because you don't have much control over that either. So they keep trying to do and do and do and not think and not think and not think, which makes them more frustrated and more frustrated and more. Have any of you experienced this? Yeah. And then some critical mass point gets hit, and then they just can't. The suffering of trying to control their thoughts just gets too overwhelming that something just sort of lets go. And then their minds quiet down. 90%. See, they didn't quiet down because they succeeded in figuring out how to get it to quiet down. They quieted down because they completely failed at the attempt to get it to quiet down. It works the opposite of the way people think.